I would now like to request my friend Mr. Suvojit Bagchi, who is the Bureau Chief of the Hindu newspaper. Suvojit has a unique distinction of working in all three media which we all look for. He has worked in BBC Radio, he has worked in television, and he is now in one of the most important newspapers of the country, heading the Bureau of Kolkata and Eastern region, and he goes to Northeast also. He has also worked in Chhattisgarh with the LWE movements, and he has, but today the marginality issue is slightly differently taken by him. The delivery extent and the vehicle of delivery. The media is a vehicle of delivery. It's a content and carriage. The carriage is changing. The so-called media is changing, like print, electronic, radio, television. These are mainstream media, we call it, traditional media, we call it. But social media is something which is emerging, and how it is affecting. So we have discussed so far on contents in media, but we can call it a marginalized so far, a minority media so far, as a vehicle, as a carriage, as a delivery mechanism of media. I think he would like to deliberate on his views on social media. Suvojit, please.
Thank you very much, Snehasis Da. Thanks to Sabir Ahmed and Mohammad Riaz for inviting me to speak on a subject, well, journalism, to make me think, which, as Freddie Agnes has just said, that which journalists rarely do, they think, and I think we don't think at all. So while writing this piece, I was thinking a bit, and I would like to extend my thanks to the organizers. Now, the topic which I have chosen in consultation with them is more news necessarily good news? And as I was writing it, I realized that I am a very worried man, and here I'm going to share my worries about myself and my profession, and rather situate the the minorities in the media landscape or the ecosystem. Now, my worries are simple, very simple, very personal. Will I be able to retire in about 15 years' time, safely and peacefully, with my increments and gratuities and everything in place? It's a very day-to-day, mundane kind of an, worry. Or will I be sacked? I've been working in this job for the last 25 years nearly. Will I be sacked, retrenched, offered a golden handshake sometime or the other? So I'm really worried about myself, and this piece is rather about my worries. Now, my concern is important. It's important as it is not my concern only, but it is the concern of hundreds of thousands of middle-aged journalists in this country, and many more millions across the world who are associated with conventional media, the print, the television, the radio to a limited extent, and of course the newer format, which is the digital. These are the regular types of conventional media. Until about 3 or 4 years back, I was very, very confident that they will all survive at least till I retire, but not anymore. Or rather, increasingly my confidence is receding, and now I'm negatively confident that journalism, as we knew it, will not survive over the next few years as we know it through print or television perhaps. Though I can't provide a particular time frame for that. Now, why? Why journalism is, or serious journalism is under threat is my question. Modern journalism, since it started, and there is there's little confusion about its exact birthday, and mostly driven by a private enterprise, which is newspaper, television and everything came over the last 30, 40 years. So if we look at this traditional format, that is the newspaper, so we find that behind every Gabriel Garcia Marquez, who was a journalist initially, there is a El Espectador, a very important, renowned newspaper. There is always a Toronto Star for every Ernest Hemingway. There is a Glenn Greenwald and a Guardian behind every Edward Snowden. A statesman behind our very own Hamdi Bey in Calcutta. A Hindu behind a P. Sainath. And a Anandabazar Patrika in Calcutta behind a Syed Mustafa Siraz, a Gaur Kishore Ghosh, or a Bikraman Nayak. There are there independent operators, the freelancers, but strong commercial journalism is largely driven by mostly rich men the aristocrats in 20th century who wanted to promote their thoughts and ideas about democracy. Their media houses made money, but also created a very tiny space for robust and honest journalism in this country, and perhaps everywhere. The problem is, in our times, these moneyed men and their media houses are being replaced by a very complex network whose arithmetic of profit is too complex for a journalist to understand, first of all, and then to produce a simple and honest reportage. Globally and increasingly, the trend is growing to have only 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 conglomerates who are taking over journalists or taking the content, the journalistic content, to the people. Now, I've just gone up, sorry, a little. Modern journalism, just a sec. Now there are, at this point, as I said, there are 5 or 6 or 7 conglomerates who are taking, most of the content to you now. Globally, not in this country, are the Facebook, the Google, the Amazon, Netflix, Disney, WeChat and Alibaba in China, which makes it 7. Now these they are not only taking journalism, they are taking many things, among which journalism is a very tiny bit. To quote the news magazine The Economist, they said that these conglomerates have made the consumers favor whatever they find on their mobile screens or at the top of the search results. No matter how important or how in-depth a report you prepare, it would entirely depend on one Google or one Facebook or one WeChat to pick it up on basis of algorithmic recommendations. The algorithmic recommendation would steer people to see what these companies would like them to watch or listen to. What I mean is that the popularity of the report will not depend on whether you are writing or producing a very well thought out report on farmer suicide or acid attack survivors or endless drought in central India or something very serious about the minorities in this country, but it will depend on whether the people are getting it on their fingertips and picking it up or not. And only few companies can take it to their fingertips. Since more often they will pick up stories on a sex robo dolls with artificial intelligence or love life of Virat Kohli, so in all probability, your very well crafted report will never be considered by the Facebook to feature on the pages of Facebook, through which a large section, the large majority of the global readers are accessing news. Now companies working day and night to make sure that certain products and certain stories get more likes on Facebook than the ones that you have prepared with great care on acid attack survivors. This also is the precise reason why you would find certain political leaders are getting more likes and more followers on Facebook than others, because there are digital companies now working to push the likes and favorable comments for the leaders, not because they are more good looking, but they have more deep pockets. This is precisely why we often are not informed these days about a people's movement in the next town or in the next city, because it is not picked up by the Facebook. Because these farmers who is losing land, or the trade union or the working community, they are most often not in the Facebook, and even if they are, they don't know how to push up their content in the Facebook. Rather, we know a lot more these days about particular political party or IPL league match or even French election, because it is picked up by the Facebook on basis of like-driven algorithms. And these likes, as I said, can be manufactured if you have very deep pockets. And in a society which is essentially and increasingly more fragmented, we are no more getting information from our neighbors, friends, or community members, or even if we are getting those information from them, they are also getting the information from the Facebook. And this is extremely dangerous. It increases the chance of spreading more misinformation at a much faster rate. This is what is defined by Catherine Viner, the first woman editor of the Guardian newspaper in its 200 papers history, as the dark age of journalism. The dark age of journalism. When on one side we are completely dependent on Facebook for information, for information, and not on our friends or community or even local or regular newspapers and conventional news gathering format, professional conventional news gathering format for fast and information. WeChat in China has taken it farther. We can discuss it later. And on the other hand, the reader or the viewer are trusting whatever is appearing on Facebook more fanatically, more obtusely. This is the best way to be misinformed, and we are indeed the best misinformed society. Ms. Weiner says, and I quote, the editor of The Guardian, "In the digital age, it's easier than ever to spread false information. Does the truth even matter anymore?" she says. The reporter reporting her lecture, one of her lectures, said that she used as an example how Pigget, the story of David Cameron allegedly putting a private part of his anatomy into a dead pig's mouth, cascaded through mainstream and social media last year. Weiner says it was gross, a great opportunity to humiliate an elitist prime minister. In fact, explained Weiner, the allegations made anonymously to a biographer who had not checked their veracity remained totally unsubstantiated. Whether or not the story was true and did not seem to matter to publishers or readers. In our digital age, she says, we are in tumult, lost in battles between rumor and fact, shaming and decency, hierarchies of the masses, the connection and alienation. To quote Weiner again, why she is saying that this is the dark age of journalism, she says, for 500 years, knowledge was contained in a fixed format, that is a newspaper, that you believe to be reliable version of truth. Now, moving to the post-print era, we are returning to an age when you are as likely to hear information right or wrong from people you come across. Dick Costolo, the former CEO of Twitter, elaborated. Costolo said that if you went back to ancient Greece, the way that news and information was passed around us, you went to the public space called Agora, that's spelled as an A-G-O-R-A, after lunch in the town square, he says, and this was unfiltered, multi-directional exchange of information, which essentially is gossip. In Sanskritized Bengali, there is a word called Chondi Mondop. It indicates many things, but essentially meaning that an agora or a public space where people assemble to chat and gossip. In many ways, spaces like Facebook or WhatsApp are modern Chondi Mondop or Greek agora where you just assemble and gossip and you spread that through Facebook and WhatsApp. The reporter who reported on Weiner's lecture also said that Weiner is particularly worried about keyboard warriors paid to spread propaganda on sites like Facebook and the misguided mob, within quote, who seem unable to distinguish between carefully researched journalism and malicious rumors that anyone can publish. These two coinages, very important, keyboard warriors and misguided mob, have huge resonance in today's West Bengal. In recent times, we have witnessed, and I'm sure Maria has in UP, in recent months we have witnessed how in Bengal rumors spread thick and fast, how the religious sites were demolished, how the dead animals were strewn all over the city, how one community or the other was attacked, and how we all got those information or misinformation over Facebook, Google and WhatsApp. Three young news gathering networks of the world used by the keyboard warriors to misguide the mob. But what is perhaps more unfortunate is across the world this misguided information is swallowing serious news publishing. Most advertising that used to go to newspapers is now going to Google and Facebook. It is now estimated, and I quote Margaret Simons, one of the foremost Australian journalist and author, and she wrote last week in The Guardian that of every dollar, now remember, just note this very carefully, of every dollar spent on advertising in the Western world today, 90 cents ends up in the pockets of Google and Facebook. 90% of the ad revenue going to Google and Facebook, Margaret Simons. Now Google and Facebook do not employ journalists, but still supplies news. In last 5 years, they have emerged as world's largest publisher, to whom even Rupert Murdoch looks very, very, very small. This is perhaps the most dangerous trend in modern journalism. Observing, and what is the dangerous trend? The trend is observing the hyper success of Google and Facebook. The media owners from across the world and in this country have realized two things. One, it is better to be an aggregator like Google or Facebook than producer of first-hand news and information, because production of original, first-hand and strong journalistic content is expensive. It has too little return on investment compared to the aggregation business, and driven by this thought, they have taken the second step. The second step is they have reduced news gathering budget, and thus you stopped getting first-hand information from the ground and rather getting a recycled version of what Google, Twitter or Facebook picked up from somewhere. That could be right or wrong. Thus we do not know how many tribals were killed in Chhattisgarh before the latest CRPF attack took place, because it's not there on Facebook. Or that in the banks of the river Tigris and Euphrates in Iraq, 900,000 to 1.2 million, 900,000 to 1.2 million, that is 12 lakh people were killed following the US-led invasion, according to the survey by opinion research business, Britain's and Europe's leading conflict research group. Now, why we don't have this unpleasant and unpalatable information, largely because of two reasons again. One, no one is ready to pay to digital publicity companies for this information to appear on Google or Facebook. And two, no media companies. And remember, it is on these banks of Tigris and Euphrates that you have a rise of ISIS after 10 years. But there were 12 lakh people killed there. European conflict agencies are saying, but you don't have that information on Google. On Google, yes, but you have to search for it, not on Facebook. So media companies is ready to bear the risk and cost to publish original content. That is point number one. And rather they are comfortable enough to use the recycled content. And that is why in his 2009 book, Flat Earth News, in his 2009 book, Flat Earth News, foremost British journalist Nick Davis showed that 80% of stories in respected British press were not original, and that only 12% were generated by the reporters. The rest are all recycled. This is also the growing trend in India. Now, I said Google and Facebook do not employ journalists. They collect and distribute news on basis of like-based or recommended algorithms. They collect and serve advertisement and news to the audience on the basis of what they know about the interest of their audience. And Ms. Simon says that for advertisers, it's all so gravy. Why pay for display ad in a newspaper when you can have your material delivered direct to the social media feeds of people who know are likely to be interested in buying your product? And hence, as I said initially, I am worried about my job and increment. 5 minutes. Okay, 3 minutes. To sum up and then I'm coming to the summing up. To sum up in the next few minutes, essentially, what is happening is you have a lot more information than before on less subjects than before. The more popular the news, they're less serious and less complex, published by keyboard warriors and digital publicity companies to misguide mobs. An example from films would perhaps make the complex dynamics more simple, as similar developments are taking place in films or music industry. Of the thousands of films released in 2016, top 13 films, all made by Disney, accounted for 20% of global revenue. In the coming years, the top 10 or 15% will account for nearly the entire revenue, much the way Google and Facebook is doing in news business. Again, why this is happening? Again, because of the same reason, the keyboard warriors are pushing 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 films by clicking on the like buttons, and thus when you are opening your Facebook page, you are only seeing one advertisement of the film Bahubali, always on your screen, and finally you end up watching the film. So no matter what you make and how good they are, a great film or a great report, it would always be the one on your screen which has more hits or likes, which is pushed by the digital publicity companies alongside keyboard warriors. And this is precisely called the dark age of journalism. In fact, I'd extend the thought a little more to say that this is also happening in the world of films and music. There are more bad news for journalism, but I would reserve those for the question answer session. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Suvojit. It was easier for me because to handle both of them were anchors and they know what does mean by 1 minute or 90 seconds or 30 seconds. Since I had to stop Suvojit, I do not want to take time to, recap what is said. Yes, he is worried, I am worried, everybody is worried. Imran sir is there. Imran sir has come to refuge of some of our worries we know. This we do not want to discuss. But yes, the insecurity in one side in journalism, and it is somebody else is setting the agenda that what we would see and what we would watch. Second-hand news as an aggregator, not as a producer. Algorithm of social media, which makes us to see and believe. So these are the things which are coming up. I think it's such a August gathering. This was very, very appropriate to discuss on the media itself, on the vehicle or the delivery mechanism or the carriage in which we receive news. This is going through a massive change and we don't know for better or worse. I think we have had so much of food for thought, and I think we would also like to require food for the stomach also. So with your kind permission, I think if you all agree, we can skip the question answer session and you can carry forward your questions in lunch. So one question, okay sir.
My question is to Maria Skill. My question is to Maria Skill.
Yes.
Well, it has been used to be said that a good journalist is a person who has been criticized by the government. The government or the political person don't like a good journalist. But nowadays, except a few like Ravish Kumar, I don't find a good journalist. So what's the reason of the decline?
Well, I think the same principle still applies today, that a good journalist need not be someone who is who has an endearing equation with the powers that be. Continues to be someone who is seen as constantly questioning the power. So, I mean, yes, I'm a big fan of Ravish as well and his brand of journalism. But of course, there are good journalists who are still there, and unlike my senior colleague here, I do not foresee any doomsday so quickly. Okay. I've been around for 13 years. Things are, of course, not very positive or looking very good, but it's not that something cannot be managed. As journalists, I think there is a huge scope for doing good investigative journalism. There is good space for coming out with good content from the ground, and a lot of us are making efforts at that. So I'm still one of those idealists who feel that the dark age of journalism hasn't still come.
Thank you. Change is the only constant. Bon appetit. Thank you very much. Thanks for patient hearing.